Europe is in the grip of a prolonged winter, literally and figuratively. A winter of discontent. Everywhere you go, there are protests, there are people grumbling, there are people blockading the streets. Greece is becoming ungovernable. The wonderful thing about coming to this side of the Atlantic is the optimism, the energy, the drive, and you know, it's infectious. Where does it come from? This extraordinary self-confidence that every visitor in your country notices. This incredible self-belief that is like a force of nature. Awesome and inexorable. An optimism and a confidence that took a dream of liberty and turned it into a functioning state. And then placed the flag of that state on the moon. That attracted tens of millions of people from every corner of the world to come here. And that liberated hundreds of millions more from the evils of fascism and communism. Where does it come from? Well, you know, American friends will sometimes say to me, it's in the culture. Well, yeah, okay, but where does that come from? Culture, my friends, is not some disembodied entity that hangs numinously alongside the institutions of a country. Culture is a product of institutions. The success of this country, the energy, the optimism, the self-belief, all go back to the little secular miracle that happened in the old courthouse in Philadelphia nearly 2.5 centuries ago. Your character comes from your institutions. There is perhaps no polity in the world so bound up in the nature of its political structures. And I tell you this, if you go down the road towards more government and more regulation and higher taxes, I don't know if you saw the Heritage Foundation study the other day of how many people are now dependent on the federal government, either through welfare claims or through state employment or whatever. If you go down that road and you reverse the constitutional settlement envisioned by your founders, you see how quickly Americans will start behaving like French people. We still hold these truths. Well, you know, I brought along a little copy of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. I mean, there's a lot of these around. This one happens to be from the American Civil Rights Union. We still hold these truths. We all know how it begins, right? Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. To see how unique that is, to see how the US polity is set apart from others, compare it with the alternatives. The European Union's equivalent of your Declaration of Independence is called the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms. Where your Declaration of Independence promises life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, the EU's equivalence guarantees our right to strike action, affordable housing, and free healthcare. Right? Now, I'm sure you can guess which way this argument is moving. If you repeat our mistakes, if you shift power from the 50 states to Washington, from the elected representative to the federal czar, from the citizen to the state, we know exactly what lies in store for you. I've been a member of the European Parliament for 12 years. I am living in your future, or at least the future towards which your present leaders seem intent on taking you. And believe me, my friends, you are not going to enjoy it. You look at the reforms being undertaken by this administration. They're not a series of random initiatives that have just been lashed together accidentally. They amount to a comprehensive policy of Europeanization. European healthcare, European daycare, European college education, European nuclear disarmament, European carbon taxes, the whole package. And I tell you, when you adopt those things, you don't just become like any other country. You become less prosperous, less independent, less democratic, and less free. We are at the end of the road that you have just set out along. We're screeching towards the cliff. And a couple of us, a very small number of us, in the parliaments of Europe are trying desperately to jam the brakes on while there's still time. And you know what? We look up, and what do we see in our rearview mirror? We see you trying to overtake us, accelerating frantically in the direction that we have been going in. My friends, there is still time to turn aside. every congressman should take his oath of office seriously. That's all you need. They stand up there and they promise to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. If they really mean that, that's enough for me. Now, that brings me on to something else. The greatness of a constitution like this is reflected in the people who serve under it. And the most vital commodity in politics is the humility to understand that you are not bigger than the government that you serve. Now, you can see that lesson. You can find that lesson in bricks and mortar, not far from here. The last time I was in this town, I had the great pleasure of visiting Mount Vernon. And there, in the frugal stonework, in the modest vegetable patches, you descry the character of a man who, though he conceived no children, fathered a nation in the happiest possible circumstances. A man who understood that the greatest gift in politics is the renunciation of power. A man who always dreamed of going back, putting down the burdens of office, and leaving before power had done its corrupting work. George Washington turned down an imperium that would have been beyond the imagination of Cincinnatus. As the sword was our last resort in the defense of our liberties, he told his countrymen, so let it be the first thing laid aside when those liberties are firmly established. And in that supreme act of modesty, he set the new republic on the happiest possible course. My friends, I'm speaking to you as a patriotic British conservative. I love my country. I'm never happier than when tramping around the countryside of England. And I admire the character of my fellow countrymen, morose and difficult and drunk, but brave and calm and reliable in hard times and indignant at injustice. And I'm proud of the things that we've given the world. And the thing that makes me most proud, our happiest export, our supreme contribution to the contentment of mankind, was the idea of representative government. The idea that laws should not be passed, nor taxes levied, except by our own elected representatives. And that idea reached its highest and most sublime form on this side of the Atlantic. And I am inspired, as British patriots are, when we look over here. We used to think, you know, there is one place where English liberties are still valued. There's one place where they haven't allowed them to be taken from them as we have in the place where they were first proposed. So you can imagine how I feel now when I come here and I see this country repeating all our mistakes. And I see the expansion of government and the erosion of representative rule and the rise of the state, and I see you making all the same mistakes that have made us less free. I used to dream of re-importing, repatriating our revolution, bringing back to the place where they were first proposed these sublime ideas of small government and big citizen. The last time I was in the US, I was in California, in the wine-growing country. And as I was traveling around, I was struck by an irresistible political metaphor. The vines that were planted in California had come from the old world. And the varieties found fertile soil in the Californian hills, and they flourished. And then in the 19th century, there was a blight in Europe, a plague called phylloxera. And the ancestral vines were wiped out. And in order to renew viticulture in Europe, the wine growers had to come to California and take cuttings from the descendants back to the ancestral vineyards and get the whole industry on its feet again. I had dreamed of doing something similar, coming here to this secure vessel and repository of British freedom and taking back to the old country the freedoms that our fathers took for granted. You can imagine how they would have felt, those wine growers, if when they arrived in California, they found that the aphids had got there before them. that the egg was already on the leaf, that there was nothing to bring back, that the dream was finished. There is still time to turn aside. It doesn't have to be this way. You deserve better, my friends, and we expect better. Let me end, my friends, let me end with a heartfelt imprecation from a British conservative who loves his country to American conservatives who still believe in theirs. Honor the vision of your founders. Cleave to the most sublime constitution devised by human intelligence. Don't be the generation that cuts itself off from the wisdom of your fathers and disinherits your children. Never be afraid to speak to and for the soul of this nation, of which, by good fortune and God's grace, you are privileged to be part. God bless you, my friends. God bless America.